And I'd like to start with a short poem by John O'Donoghue, which is really beautiful. He was an Irish poet and writer and spiritual teacher, just beautiful, and the muse to David Whyte. They are, I don't know if you know the poet David Whyte, but they inspired each other. But he said, fluent, I would love to live like a river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. I would love to live like the river flows, carried by the surprise of its own unfolding. And I think of trauma work like that. So we are actually the river. Our process is the river, but our organism is also a river. We are actually a fluid human being. We're made mostly out of water, and we forget that fact. And our process actually is unfolding. There is an unfolding. What we often do is we locate ourselves in the stuckness, and trauma is a kind of stuckness. I'll talk about that in a minute. But we also have this incredible river that keeps flowing. Life certainly keeps going, but we also keep going. There is an innate fluidity that's baked into our organism, our nervous system, our somatic nervous system, and we have a whole fluid system in the body, the cerebral spinal fluids, the synovial fluids of our joints, yeah? And no matter how compromised your body is, and this is what I learned from Continuum, who there's a whole application to the work with working with severely compromised bodies, people who've had spinal cord injuries and had severe limitations, that even the smallest little movement in a joint will inspire a sense of fluidity, feeling, and well-being in the body. And this is where I learned at the height of my training of working with severe trauma populations and having all these tools under my belt. When I came to practicing Continuum and then later on teaching it, is wait a minute, there's trauma, and then there's also this river that we have innately in us. And touching that, knowing that, is actually the answer to healing and integrating trauma. So just hold that as an image, as both a beautiful metaphor and but also a truth of how our body's actually organized. Just to kind of, for those of you who don't know Hakomi, I just want to reference that because it stands on that shoulder, is Hakomi has five core principles. We work with embodied mindfulness as a principle where we induce people into a different state of awareness, which is mindfulness. So people study their experience at a shifted awareness. So in Hakomi, we don't ask people to necessarily think about something. We ask them to slow down and feel and sense and really get in touch with the sensing, feeling, bottom up approach of the body. And then organicity is the principle of letting things unfold, following what's actually happening. So that could be an impulse in the body, that could be a sensation, that could be a feeling, there could be an image, or there could be a relational piece. And we're trusting what arises. And when I first studied Hakomi and started to teach it, I over and over again thought that organicity is such a key element of the work because you really are trusting what is arising, the anger, right? The confusion in the client. What's arising is actually intelligence. Given the circumstance, given what they're dealing with, given how they're feeling, of course they're angry. So what if we're just like accepting that is an experience to unfold versus like, okay, let me get you out of that. So organicity is really that river part. Huh? So what's unfolding is actually intelligent. The other principle is nonviolence. In Hakomi, we're going with the client rather than having a concept. Like here's my worksheet number 510. Let's go through it. There's no problem with having some steps or tools, but nonviolence is deeply, deeply listening to what's actually wanting to happen in the client. And do I have an agenda about how this should be going or not? Yeah. So a resistance, for example, of a client is seen as intelligent. Yeah? So they're putting up the roadblocks, they're going, I don't want this, or you go like, oh, let's just inquire with that. Let's see what that's expression is. What's with this? Yeah? And so nonviolence is really deeply listening. What is happening in the client? Where do they want to go versus my method-driven approach? Body mind holism is a principle where we're constantly looking at how is the body organizing itself and how is my mind organizing in response to it. How is my mind influencing the body? How's my body influencing the mind? And recognizing that they're deeply interconnected and that there really is no split in the body. We create splits, but the body is one whole organism. And body and mind are constantly interweaving and informing one another. And then unity is a principle in which we're recognizing the interconnection of all phenomena. That the client and I are sitting in the room right now is not an accident. Yeah, maybe they find me on some directory or they heard of me, but the fact that they're entering into my office at this time is no coincidence. That the client is having these kind of issues and I'm going like, wow, this is really triggering me, is no coincidence. Yeah. That there is such a thing as we're being interconnected and interdependent of one another. And that also that the client is arriving at this time where they're wanting to do some healing work is also interconnected with many different other steps that they've taken beforehand. Maybe they heard a podcast and now they decided to come into therapy. Maybe they've done years of therapy and now they're landing in your office. Yeah, that all is interconnected. There's no such thing as like some insulated event, just as there's no insulated human. We're always in relation to something or somebody. Yeah? We're in relation to the environment, we're in relation to our family, if we like them or not. We're in relation to the natural world. We're always in relationship and interconnected. That famous, like you hear a butterfly wing in one end of the universe is creating a tsunami on the other, right? Or hurricane on the other end. So that there is an interdependence and interconnection of all phenomena. And that's really important because when we're talking about trauma, we're not just going, oh, you had this one trauma and we're going to treat it. We need to look at your individual trauma is interconnected with how the family was organized, maybe how the ancestors suffered multi-generational trauma and that impacted your family system, how maybe the political or social turmoil of what your family was going through at the time is impacting your upbringing, your belief systems. Yeah. Somebody growing up in Syria is very different organization of the experience than somebody growing up in a very safe place in the United States or somebody in Thailand or you name it. Yeah. So we can't look at trauma as this like, oh, this person with a trauma. We need to look at it trauma in interconnection with what and who and how. So I take always that lens of here's the individual story, their sexual abuse, their family issue, whatever it is, right? Or they've gone through an experience of whatever. And then how is it connected? So the individual trauma is always part of the collective, is always part of the intergenerational. They're not separate. So this is how I like to look at the unity principle. Somatic intelligence refers to the innate ability to be aware and understand our bodily sensations, movements, and emotions, and that we are a self-organizing organism. Yeah? We self-organize. Give us enough safety, enough of connection, enough of belonging. Basically, water those qualities of human beingness, warmth, and connection, and we will blossom. You interrupt us in our connection with our soma, our belonging, our roots, compromise basic safety, and we will struggle. But we are also self-organizing, right? We will strive towards the light. We will strive towards what heals, what grows, what supports, right? We strive towards it. It's actually innate in us. And there's a whole field of post-traumatic growth where there's been a lot of study done about how through some adverse experiences, we actually begin to grow. We begin to understand ourselves. We begin also to perhaps get altruistic too. There's a lot of evidence that people who suffer actually often become more compassionate human beings. Of course, it can go the other way, of course, but often we also find that people who suffer the most become often the most generous and abundant humans. Have you noticed that? The people who have the least often give the most. Yeah. So there is a self-organizing principle that we want to strive towards integration and healing. Are the ways how we do that healthy or not? That's debatable. Yeah, and this is also where the intersection comes between, for example, addiction. Yeah, there is often the impulse to wanting to flee my inner experience that's so horrid. I want to get away from it. I want to medicate myself. I want to give myself some sweetness and some other reality and some kindness or whatever it is. I want to escape. Is in itself an intelligent action, but of course it's a self-destructive um, pathway and misguided because it's not informed and not supported. But this model that somehow somebody who suffers with addiction is just some bad human, I don't think that's, I think we can throw that now out, right? We've now know this, that the impulse towards addictive behavior is actually an attempt to wanting to come back to the self-organizing organism. But these pathways have been interrupted, and so they need help, right? They need our help. And this is where the work comes in to bring people back to somatic intelligence because it's innate. It can be accessed in trauma healing no matter how big the trauma is. And even our responses to a traumatic experience of fight, flight, and freeze, and collapse and fawn are intelligent responses. They're actually resourceful. But we get stuck there. Yeah, we get stuck, and this is where we need the help. And the other thing I'd like to always say is that we're not our trauma. There's a huge identification with trauma, but we're not our trauma. Yeah? We have learned experiences. So inner sensations and felt sense, which I really highlight a lot in this work. So really coming back to the body in minutia way, the sensation, the movements, the really intrinsic ones, that direct experience into the soma. The client comes in with a story, right? I'm such a bad human. This happened to me. The abuse that this is verbatim a client. The abuse that I suffered, I deserved it, right? This client told me that when she was sexually and physically abused by her parents at a young age, she literally said to me, "Oh, I deserve this because I was born on Friday the 13th." That's a date and a day. And she has created meaning out of her horrid experience. And so we have experience and then we create meaning. And they get conflated, especially in young children. So when this client was saying that to me, I literally was dumbstruck. I was like, my face literally betrayed me that moment. And I went, what? And she says, yeah, I was born doomed. And many trauma survivors have that feeling that they're broken, wrong, doomed, good will come, born under the wrong star. These are all meaning-making explanations because my inner experience is so overwhelming, so difficult. I don't know where and who I am inside. I have to go out and create some meaning. Oh, it's that date. It's because I'm doomed. I'm part of that category of people. You name it. But it's actually misguided because the person has lost contact with their most precious resource, which is re-remembering themselves as intelligence, re-remembering the resources that they have, the breath that brings them home, the sensation that they can be with, the emotion that's allowed, the movement in the body that wants to be expressed. So this is part of this work is that I'd like to guide people back. What's intelligence right now? My anger, me wanting to push away people, feeling like I'm bad, whatever it is. So let's just be with that. And then notice how the feeling is and the sensation in your body. So you're deconstructing the meaning into sensation, into intelligence. And so that's a lot of the route because trauma interrupts connection. It interrupts the connection to the self, to the others, and the natural world. And as I said, it impacts safety and belonging. And it begins to dysregulate us, our nervous system, our emotions, right? And we get repeated behavior of our trauma responses. I get frightened, I run away. I get intimidated, I attack, right? I I feel unsafe, I freeze. Somebody is bullish towards me, I appease them, right? The threat feels too big, I'll collapse and submit to whatever. Those are our trauma responses. And those responses are designed biologically to interrupt connection so that we can survive. But then these surviving coping mechanisms really interrupt our somatic knowing. We get disconnected. We interrupt. We have lost that pathway. It's not that it's not there, we just lost it. Yeah. So our body remembers the trauma, the ancestral messages. It remembers these unresolved memories and experiences. But we also remember the inherent goodness, love, belonging, connection, resources, sensation to our being. We also remember that. So as I said, it's inherent. Even in the most traumatized process, we can remember that. And some people go as like, yeah, my life is a series of disappointments and people betraying me and hurting me and da da da. But there once was a coach that was really kind to me. Or this one person, did a really nice thing for me once. How do they know that? How do they remember that? Right? That's a pathway in. So even in the most horrid trauma stories, there is often a story of benevolence and goodness somewhere. So this is really, again, and the body remembers that. And we need to help our client to go there. Because evolutionary speaking, we're wired to look for danger and adverse experiences because we need to protect ourselves. So you have 10 positive experiences, one negative one. Guess which one rules? That one. Because we're wired for survival. We're also wired for connection. But if it comes down to it, we need to look out for ourselves and safety. So that one negative experience will skew the 10 positive ones. How many of you have ever, I'm going to come out for a second here. How many of you have ever had, you go into do a presentation or a little talk or a group of people you're speaking up and people are looking at you with excitement and want to hear from you, and then there's this one grumpy person in the back that kind of have their arms like this, and are you zeroing on that person and going like, oh my god, I failed, this is it, this was horrible, they don't like me? Yeah, how many of us have yes, right, we do that because evolutionary speaking, we need to look for where's the danger, who's the one that doesn't like me, where's the one that where I don't belong, who's confirming this, right? If we have trauma, we have an extra super sensor for that. It's like, where is that one person that doesn't like me? Right? Ah, there it is. Meanwhile, 100 people are beaming at you and go like, that's awesome, you're amazing. And you go, yeah, that doesn't matter. Right? So we devalue positivity and abundance because we're trained, and especially with trauma, we're trained to look for adversity and danger and threat because our biology demands it. But we can train it the other way around. We can train, and this is the whole point of this work, we can train towards embodiment and then have the client re-remember. A couple more slides and then I'll do something experiential with you guys. So embodiment is an awareness process through which we recognize ourselves as interconnected living systems. This awareness involves tuning into the moment-to-moment flow of feelings, sensations, thoughts, movements, and energies, all of which relate to our immediate experiences, past lived experiences, and the creative possibilities for the future. Life pulses through us like a rhythmic heartbeat, connecting us to our inner depths and the world. This rhythm brings wisdom and insight, enriching our understanding of existence and enabling us to respond authentically, engage fully.